I'm not a data scientist, so I'm aware of being in a room full of very smart people. I showed this picture to my daughter the other day, and she's like, Mommy, everybody else in the picture is working, and you're just looking at the camera. It's exactly right. I'm sort of the chief convener and storyteller at Code for America. So I hope I can tell you guys a story that makes you interested in the problems that we tackle. The organization that I run and that I work for believes that government can work. And I think in a tech industry context right now, even that can sometimes be a controversial phrase. But we believe it not only can work, but that it can work for the people, by the people in the 21st century. But we believe very much that that is not going to happen unless we make it so. And we don't mean that we is Code for America. We mean we the people, the big we, all of us in this room, all of us in this country. And so I just want to tell you a little bit about what we do. We recruit people to come do a year of service. They have data skills, they have design skills, technology skills, and we pair them with City Hall. So this is a couple of fellows going to work their first day at Long Beach City Hall, where we did a great, very data-oriented program with them to help them reduce frequent flyers to the emergency room. Sort of a weird term. The people who use the emergency room a lot for primary care, being able to hotspot that and get services to them. Right now we're in the middle of our 5th year of this fellowship program, and we've got 8 fantastic local government partners. I'm going to talk a little bit about 2 of them in particular, but first I was hoping to show you all just 2 minutes of kind of what it's like to be at Code for America, so you understand a bit of the rest of the presentation. So a quick little video about our folks.
We all interact with government every day, making sure that the relationship that we have with our government is positive and efficient, that both parties end up happy. That's really important.
I believe Code for America's mission of government that works better for the people means, what if we had social safety net programs that were really easy to access? What if it doesn't take 6 months to fix a leaky roof for a senior center?
The fellowship program is a year of service where talented technologists pair with city governments to work on some of the challenges of today, such as economic development, health, and public safety.
As technologists and designers, we could go into the private sector and we can do all these interesting things, but we have these amazing skill sets, and we should be really mindful that we're using those skills for the better of all of us.
The fellowship is the hardest job you'll ever love. In the public sphere, you really have to serve everybody, and so it becomes a much deeper kind of technical problem around the idea of maximal access for the largest number of people. Creating tools, working with technologies that have to basically help every single person in society.
The fellowship helps you develop a sense of empathy for people in government. So they want to do the best possible job they can, but they often don't have the resources or the know-how. Going through the fellowship just showed that if you work in tandem with folks in government, you can actually get a lot done.
Every day I get the chance to continue collaborating with city staff, making their lives easier so that they can make the lives of all the people that they're serving easier.
I think technologists have the ability to bring in their sort of iterative, data-driven, user-centered approach into local government to fix some of the core challenges that governments face.
My team and I are working on healthcare for the underinsured.
I'm working on building trust between the community and the police department.
I'm working on how governments purchase things.
I'm working to help children reach services they need.
The team and I are working on a tool for the police department to better understand their data so they can better make decisions on where to allocate resources throughout the community. The fellowship is a bold challenge to undertake, but it's worthwhile in the end.
You should become a fellow
if you have the skill set and you have the passion.
If you believe that government can make a difference and be better.
If you're interested in solving really complicated social problems.
You should become a fellow if you actually want to change the world.
That's Tiffany Bell, by the way, who's changing the world. She created something called the Detroit Water Project because she was upset at people having their water turned off in Detroit and decided she could crowdsource funding for them, and has turned on something like 700 water service to 700 Detroiters' homes. This is like an amazing group of people. They're not always doing data projects, but they see a problem and they go fix it, and they're just very inspiring to me. I wanted to talk today, there's so much stuff that we do. We work in these sort of wide variety of focus areas. But when I thought about trying to give you all an example of the differences when you're working with public sector data, as opposed to some of the very large and robust data sets that I'm sure you're touching in other spheres, it really made me think about our work currently in the public safety and criminal justice area. How I got involved, we never used to be specialized in particular areas. And in fact, it was about 3 or 4 years ago, I got a call from this woman. Her name is Ann Milgram. She was the Attorney General of New Jersey, who was recruited then to be the VP of Criminal Justice at a place called the Arnold Foundation, where they say they're going to moneyball criminal justice. And she asked me to join a call and see if we would explore having Code for America Fellows work on criminal justice problems. And I actually initially said I would not take the call. We were a couple of years old at the time. And for a new organization that is bringing in people who have they look different, they act different in many ways from the people in government, there was a real fear, I think, about what fellows would do with data, particularly sensitive data. And so initially I was a bit of a coward, and I said, look, we can't at this phase of our organization start working with data as sensitive as data in the criminal justice system. But it happened that my sister is a lawyer, and she was trying to help, she was working in a pro bono case in Oklahoma, and kept calling me and saying, you work in open data, why can't I get any data about the judges that have condemned this person to life imprisonment? Why can't I get any data out of the criminal justice system? I took the call with Ann actually to help my sister. I put her on the phone too. But at the end of the phone call, I had basically in my mind at that point committed us to, I think, what will now be years of working in the criminal justice system, because what she told me outraged me. And it seemed like a very meaty problem that the people of our community, Code for America's community, this community, can really help solve. There's actually a lot of problems. I'm going to touch on a couple of them. So crime is down in our country significantly, but the number of people that we imprison is dramatically up. So what's wrong with that? Turns out nearly 75% of people are sentenced are in for very, very minor crimes. And what you realize when you start digging into this stuff is that most of the dialogue in our society is about the policies that create outcomes like that. And I am not going to tell you that there are not policies that create the outcomes. There certainly are. But what no one really talks about is the ways in which there's another massive contributor to statistics like that, which is actually in a bucket that I would call implementation or service delivery, or the way that we interact with government, which is things that are not actually intended by the policies that we create. So for example, we worked in Atlanta previous year. So in Atlanta, 200,000 people every year get a traffic ticket. We've all probably gotten traffic tickets. I certainly have. They're kind of a pain in the ass. But if you are poor, here's what will often happen to you with a traffic ticket. You may then, the government will send you a mail at your snail mail address telling you you've got to do something about this traffic ticket. In many cases, you will not get that mail if you don't have a permanent home address that it can be sent to. Or you may get it and lose it. Or you may get it and not be able to go to the appointment that they've made for you to deal with it. But in Atlanta in particular, so this is not made up, about over 5 hours of waiting in line to pay that traffic ticket or deal with that traffic ticket. So if you have a job that doesn't let you get out of work, you are often choosing between keeping your job and getting that ticket dealt with. And that's what happens if you don't get that ticket dealt with, is that you will eventually be issued something called a bench warrant. And a bench warrant basically means that the next time you're picked up for driving without a license because you couldn't get a license in the first place, or maybe you're a teenager and you were skateboarding on the sidewalk, you will actually be thrown in jail. And I know that seems crazy, but there's this like very, very clear progression where people can end up being in jail for really, really, really minor violations. So one of the things that we've done in Atlanta that year was just give people a really easy way to text in and find out, do they have to come in? Can they make an appointment so that it's not taking all day? Send them a reminder via text message telling them when their court date is so that they show up. This is all in the realm of reducing FTAs, failure to appear. If you reduce failures to appear, you will reduce the burden on the criminal justice system, and you will have fewer people that they're being held in jail for minor violations in pretrial. You also look up your case so that easy ways for people to interact with this stuff. But this really, really drove home for me. So Anne's description of the number of things that are going wrong in our system because we don't have good data and because we have very bad systems got me very, very activated. And one of the things that she talked about was releasing people pre-trial. If you're held pre-trial, you're something like 8 times more likely to be convicted of the crime, and you're very likely to have lost your job in the meantime. But she talked about this thing of bench warrants being an indicator of something very, very wrong in our society. And that was about 3 years ago. So when I saw this in the New York Times, so this is cities in Missouri, bench warrants per person. So do you see that one all the way on the left, the 1,500 bench warrants per 1,000 people? So that's 1.5 bench warrants per person. Does anybody want to venture a guess what city in Missouri that is? Ferguson. It's Ferguson. It kind of freaked me out. It was clear to me at that point that this notion that we should be paying attention to things like bench warrants, which are essentially just administrative mess, right? You can really tie it back to, I think, how messed up our society is right now. So, long story in between, but based on that conversation, we ended up deciding to focus about 1/3 of our work in the criminal justice and public safety space. Our other 2 areas are access to human services and economic development, and then we have sort of a 4th one now in citizen engagement. And we're doing a lot of amazing work in this area, partly through the fellowship and partly through some other programs that we run now. But I want to talk a little bit about sort of the promise of data. So Anne got me interested in this because she sort of showed me that there are ways in which we can use data to make much better decisions and have a more just society. This is Brett Goldstein, who was the first chief data officer of a city in the United States. He was chief data officer of Chicago. And he was one of the sort of first people to really apply predictive analytics to the job of policing. He's a former cop who sort of got noticed as a nerd and put in charge of stuff. And he would do things like layer whole bunches of data together and say, we know that when the street light goes out here, all of the garbage cans disappear. And so if we can fix those lights before the others, we're going to save money here. Just making basic correlations to help cities use resources better. And there's this wonderful notion of how we can use this data for the public good. And then there's the reality of how we find this data and what this data can mean to us. So this is a map. I know you can't read this. I actually can't read it, and I'm really close to it. But it's a map of the criminal justice system that I'm not going to walk you through, except to say that at every point where you move from one part of the system to another, the data does not follow. Each point in this graph, the person making a decision at that point has almost no access to what happened before, has almost no case history, and has almost no aggregate data about what other people in the situation have done. To give you an example, there is very little information available to a judge who is charged with sentencing somebody about what alternatives to incarceration there are, but particularly about whether those alternatives to incarceration have given us a reasonable outcome. If we put someone in this program and hoped that they would then not commit another crime or that not have to go back to jail, did it work? Nobody knows pretty much at any time. It's not that nobody knows, but certainly the judge making that decision, and in most cases in the US right now, does not have that information at the time of the sentencing. So what I'd like to do now is like a cheat in a talk, but to just show you a little clip from The Daily Show about some of the data that we are trying to work with both in Indianapolis and Vallejo, California right now, and I think that you will appreciate this. Let's see. Maybe, if it plays. Hold on, guys, sorry, it's worth it. Daily Show is very funny, as you know. Oh, that's the best part. I'm going to give this a second, but you want to futz with it? No. So I'll start with what I was going to share after that. We've got a team of fellows right now working in Indianapolis, Indiana, and one of the things they're trying to do in this context of, we got 10 minutes? In this context of, right now, with concern about data in our criminal justice and public safety systems, especially about police use of force, is figure out how would you know if a cop needs to be taken off of the force? How do you know who is the next person who's going to shoot somebody when they probably shouldn't have a gun in their hand right now? One of the things that they found out is that cops in Indianapolis are continually retrained on some very regular basis, and I'm sorry I'm forgetting what it is. And these trainers are actually assessing them at that time for whether they're able to sort of follow procedure, understand procedure. Do they look like there's someone who's sort of, on board right now?
We lost network.
So we lost network. It's so funny, but I'm not going to try to pretend to be Samantha Bee because she's very funny. They find that, so a bunch of data is collected about the performance of these cops in their training sessions that should be added to the performance that their managers see, of the data that they collect about how they are doing their daily jobs. Those forms are filled out on paper by the trainers and they are filed. It's not even
Tide Pods?
Yeah. Oh, great.
That little guy cleans, brightens, and fights stains.
I'm Tide. You should buy Tide or whatever this is. So what we find really often is that the data that we need to solve the problem is data that either doesn't exist at all. Yeah, it has to play for a second. I'm not going to play you the whole thing. Hold on. I will forward it to the right place. Okay, here we go. Hold on. Okay. Jump. Come on, do it.
Yeah, you. Roll the piece.
There's been much discussion lately about the use of lethal force by our nation's law enforcement. But to address the problem, one thing all Americans need to do is look at the data.
One of the vital pieces of information that they need to have is how often the government kills people.
Criminologist and author David Klinger.
First of all, are shootings of civilians by the police increasing or decreasing?
It's too hard to know.
Okay, it's not that hard. Increasing means it's going up, and decreasing means going down.
We have no idea.
Okay, that's probably a mistake. There's got to be some kind of a database.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation has a count that they put out every year in something called the Uniform Crime Report, but it's so far off that it really isn't usable.
How off would you say the numbers are?
Somewhere between wildly inaccurate and astronomically inaccurate.
That can't be right. Police keep stats on everything.
So back it up for a minute. How many bicycles are stolen every year in this country?
220-some thousand.
How many home burglaries are there?
800,000 or so.
Do the police keep records of how many bullets are discharged on a monthly basis?
All major police departments do track that, yes, ma'am.
Okay, do the police keep a record of how many bullets are discharged in the direction of civilians?
Yes.
How many people are shot by cops annually?
No idea.
Okay, now you're just with me.
Okay, you know what? If you want
So it's a great piece. I'm going to show you the end. But so now she goes and interviews basically another former New York City cop, sort of the same story, and then someone who's crowdsourcing the data. So they've gotten a little bit of the data. So sort of the by the people part of our message comes through here. There are a lot of people who actually do fill in the gaps where we don't have data. But I'll just show you the end because it's kind of funny, actually. Here we go, if it will skip to.
Dad! I looked everywhere.
Sorry.
Question for you. People were shot and killed last year by the police.
Those statistics just don't exist.
And you call yourself a dork.
Nate Silver.
I wouldn't use that term.
Okay, well, I would. Dork.
Maybe it was time I got the FBI to answer some questions. And I knew just how to get their attention.
Oh, they're already here. Guys, I have a question for you. Oh my God! Ah! Oh God, I just want to know how many police shootings there are. Ow! Ow! You stepped on my boob!
It was time to turn to my most trusted advisor.
You will meet a small male dork. Oh, I've already talked to Nate Silver. God!
I looked
There's more. I'm going to leave it there. This is, the end line is nobody wants their kid to grow up to be a statistic. Thankfully, there's no chance of that. So back to more serious matters. The point is, this is not some like hysterical, Daily Show thing. This is actually very much what we see when we go into cities, and this actually goes across just the criminal justice area, where the data that you think that you need to help people make better decisions or to improve a service just simply isn't there. So what are we doing about that? This is our Indianapolis team at the White House bringing their partners in Indianapolis city government, the police chief and the director of public safety, to a big meeting where this is what they do. You see the cities on the side and the data sets that need to be made available, and getting these cities, leader by leader, committing to opening various data sets or to getting that data together. In Indianapolis, one of the things they're doing is that they find that if you go to make a complaint about a police officer, this is the other really critical data that you would want to know if you're trying to predict a cop that's going to shoot people when they shouldn't, is has there been complaints about them? Well, the way that you have to file a complaint, this is not a data problem, this is a service delivery problem, is you have to go in person to this office during very, very limited hours and file a complaint, and you have absolutely no visibility into what happens in the future and with that complaint. And so they're creating a better digital service to that, because that digital service will I think, create a data set that is much more trustworthy and much more robust about citizens' complaints. So our team there is helping them open 4 of the 9 data sets that they've committed to opening. And they're doing this amazing police open data census for cities across the country. I put the URL there in the ugliest slide design I have, but hopefully you may want to take a look at it. But you think about things, if you think about these things, it really falls in a big category of, because of a lack of digital competence within government, what we have is a situation where the policies actually don't match the delivery, and we actually can't govern if we cannot implement our policies. And when I say that, I hope what comes to mind is healthcare.gov. I spent a year at the White House in the Office of Science and Technology Policy. Happened to be the year that healthcare.gov melted down, so I was very close to that disaster, very close to what we actually had planned since before the meltdown as the solution for it, which is the United States Digital Service. So we went in knowing, before healthcare.gov happened, there were things like the fact that we have a great policy around the enormous amount of student debt, federal student loan debt in this country. It's about $1 trillion. Well, we created a great policy that allows you, if you have that debt, to refinance it based on the income you have. It's called the income-based repayment loan, and it says, when you have money, then pay it off. In the meantime, why don't you not go bankrupt? But the website that you use to apply for the IBR program is basically unusable. It starts with, give us your FAFSA number. No one has their FAFSA number. They walk away. So we've got about 3% adoption of that program because of a bad digital service. And what really this comes down to is this inability of us to translate these programs into effective implementations very much disproportionately affects the poor and the underserved in our country. This is what Ezra Klein wrote about healthcare.gov at the time, and it was so important to us because we were screaming this in the dark at the time. At Code for America, we had fellows working on things like food stamps and mass incarceration, and we could see over and over again the effect of terrible digital services on the people in our country who need our help the most. And it wasn't until middle-class people had to use something as bad as healthcare.gov that kind of rose to the surface as a real problem that's our problem nationally, not just the problem of people with fewer resources. This, by the way, is the notice that you get if you apply for food stamps. I say the problems I'm talking about in the criminal justice space do transfer across, we see them across all of the other areas. If you get a notice like this when you apply to food stamps, I'm not going to read it to you in the interest of time, but it doesn't make any sense. And you don't know what to do in response to it, because what it's actually asking you to do is to send in additional documentation, you will fall off the rolls of the SNAP program, and then you will find yourself in the front of the line at the checkout store with your groceries all bagged up, and you will run your EBT card, and it will not work. And that's the kind of thing that we put people through every day, and that's the kind of moment that Code for America fellows tune into. They have interviewed these people, they're working with the people who've had these experiences, so they know that not only when that happens are you humiliated, because everyone behind you in line is wondering what's going on with you, but that you're hungry and you're going home to a family that needs that food. So an enormous percentage of EBT is spent at Wednesday at midnight, because that's when the cards get recharged. You probably wouldn't be shopping at midnight on Wednesday if you didn't really need that food for your family. Again, back to the pattern that we showed earlier, there are things that you can do about this. There's some more fundamental things that need to happen, but in the meantime, things like text messaging people to tell them they need to call the office or they're going to fall off of the rolls has proven to be very helpful, and we did that for the city and county of San Francisco. But there are dozens and dozens of other projects like this. I mentioned the student loans. There's things like the identity theft that foster kids are very often subject to federal pensions, visa benefits. There's 1,000 things like this that the skills that you have need to be applied to in order to make our society just and fair. And so I know you all have jobs and are in school and doing amazing things, but I would ask that you think about the number of ways that you could contribute to this cause. If you've only got an hour, there's a million ways you can contribute. The second link there is to our Civic Tech Issue Finder, where people can just look and see what needs to be done and help out. We've got a great event coming up on June 6th called the National Day of Civic Hacking, and there'll be events both in the East Bay and San Francisco for there. Anybody here involved with the Code for America Brigade? Hello, I'm so glad to hear that. So brigades meet, there's Oakland and San Francisco, and they meet once a week. The San Francisco one's at our office, and Oakland is at City Hall. Do amazing things, like if you are a resident of Oakland, you'll know that our budget came out, and our Oakland Brigade put up a fantastic visualization of the budget. But we have brigades all over the country doing this all of the time. And I'd ask all of you to think about and sort of spread the word about the opportunities to do this kind of work in a service year, whether it's through Code for America or the Presidential Innovation Fellows Program at the federal level that I worked on, or even to think about the incredible impact that you can make by actually going into government. People like Ann Milgram, who I showed, or Brett Goldstein, are people who made that choice to do their service by actually taking making a career move for some amount of time. And of course, there are so many startups to be built that serve the public in a better way. It's an enormous, enormous market that is desperately in need of and being, I think, disrupted. And there's actually now a fund that funds companies that work particularly in the Gov space, the Gov Tech Fund. But of course, the one opportunity I'll push a little bit just is that we are recruiting for Code for America Fellows for the 2016 cycle. The application will be open in a couple weeks, and it's open through the summer. And please tell everybody you know that it's a fantastic thing to do, because really, at the end of the day, it's not so much government for the people, this grandiose notion of the people. It's about those people who are in the front of the checkout line at the grocery store, or that person who's in jail because they didn't have a driver's license. It's government for people, the real people who live near us that need our help, and by those people as well. So please consider it, and thank you for having me, and I'm happy to take questions if there's time. One question. Yes.
How do you sort of mitigate this challenge of thanks. How do you mitigate these problems with dealing with these really entrenched bureaucratic organizations? I mean, I would imagine you get a lot of sort of resistance to change and to technology. I mean, how do you go about delivering your messages to them in a way that helps them see what you're doing?
I would answer that there's a lot of things, there's a lot of ways to sort of help with change management. I think the one thing to recognize, though, is that I often tell sort of horror stories about how bad things are in government, how the assumed solutions are kind of not the solutions that maybe you or I would think make sense. But on the other hand, it's really important to understand how much will there is for change within government, how excited people are to have a different perspective, and not just the perspective like different thinking, but actually people who can do things. That's really what they have been missing for so long. And there are more people wanting to serve the public and do the right thing by far than there are people who are intentionally blocking. That doesn't mean that people don't end up being blockers in some ways. The most effective thing over and over again that we see in changing people's minds and getting them on board is show, don't tell. Mock it up, get a sample set of the data and throw it out there. Mock up an interface, just make it up, do something, and show it. And suddenly people are talking about the thing that you made and how it might be different instead of why it shouldn't be made, or that. And if you don't have the data, again, you've got to use dummy data. But getting people to talk about an actual real thing that, whether it's right or not, changes the conversation. Partly because that so seldom happens within government. Within government, typically, here's a problem. We're going to write a very, very long RFP, and over the course of 2 or 3 years, that'll be revised by 7 different people, and then it'll go out the door, and then 3 years after that, there might be a technology solution that comes in. And so I made something that kind of looks like what you're talking about yesterday is kryptonite. I hope that helps.
Well done.
Okay, thanks very much.